I'd like to welcome you to CoSA's Shop Talk with Newspapers.com by Ancestry. I'm Lisa Johnston. I'm the Administrative Coordinator for the Council of State Archivists. And so we want to give you an opportunity to learn more about this, one of our partners at CoSA. Our speakers today are going to be Brent Carter and Carl Carter, and yes, if you're asking, they are related, okay? So let me tell you a little bit about Brent. Brent is the Senior Director of Content at Newspapers.com, which is an Ancestry.com website. He's been with Ancestry for 15 years, has served in a number of different positions there, including the Director of Business Development and the Director of Operations. Through Newspapers.com product, Brent has helped hundreds of newspapers and archives digitize and preserve their historical archives. Newspapers.com is the largest online newspaper archive with over 550 million searchable newspaper pages from over 16,000 newspaper publications. Now, Carl Carter is the Content Partnership Manager at Newspapers.com, working with many of the state archive and university partners. He has been with Ancestry for the past 5 years, working initially with the full 3 site before moving over to work with Brent at Newspapers.com. Carl has a love for family history that led him to work at Ancestry, and he obtained a certification in family history research from Brigham Young University. So welcome, Brent and Carl, and I'm going to turn this over to you guys.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And it's so good to be joining all of you and sharing a little bit about Newspapers.com in your CoSA Shop Talk. Carl and I were just joking before we got on the call that if anyone doubted if we were related, those 2 pictures side by side really quash any doubt that would be there. So there's some resemblance there, certainly. But we're actually sitting in an office together or in a conference room. We're typically telecommuting, and all of Ancestry is right now, but thought we would come in to help control the environment just a little bit more. So I know at my house it can be tough to find a quiet space to actually do a presentation like this. So I saved you from rowdy kids in the background and questions about homework. So hopefully it'll work out for us. Well, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about Newspapers.com. And I'm going to make sure I can go the right way on these and tell you who Newspapers.com is. And hopefully you've heard of at least Ancestry. I know we've been around for a long time and been involved in the archives and supporting one another in those roles. I want to tell you a little bit about Newspapers.com and how they got started. So Ancestry actually acquired a small company named iArchives back in 2010. And I actually was part of iArchives, and that's when I started working on newspapers, actually on Ancestry. And iArchives had built a name for themselves in the industry of digitizing historical newspapers, and it worked really closely with the Library of Congress on the NDNP projects. So many of the early projects that were done through the NDNP program was actually digitized through the iArchives workflow engine. And so as Ancestry acquired iArchives, they established this wonderful new workflow that was optimized towards historical newspapers. And so Ancestry had a lot of newspapers on their site, in fact, about 25 million pages, but those pages weren't viewed as much as they anticipated. So as they acquired iArchives, they decided to start a standalone newspaper site that optimized the search engine and everything to be able to help more people find historical newspapers. So with this new workflow, they started reinvesting in digitizing historical newspapers. And so now we're working with hundreds of different newspapers and archives and libraries around the world, really, and have digitized, actually the number now is over 570 million pages. And we digitize at a rate of about 10 million pages every month that we add to the site. So Ancestry is indeed investing in these newspapers and making these available online. So to give you a little bit of highlight into what we'll be talking about and covering in this presentation, and First, we're going to start off with a short demo of the Newspapers.com site and kind of give you a feel for the different tools and user interface that is on Newspapers.com. I know many archives across the country have developed their own kind of way to display newspapers to their patrons or are using third parties. So we thought we'd show you a little bit about what Newspapers.com has, as well as what our partner access pages look like. And I'll let Carl talk to you a little bit more about what those are. We're going to also talk a little bit about a new AI technology that we're using to extract facts from these newspapers, and that's an exciting new technology that we've developed. I also want to tell you a little bit about our digitization workflow and how we've been able to digitize so many of these images and what that looks like and some of the things we've learned from that might be helpful for you. At the end, of course, we wanted plenty of time for some questions and answers. And so there should be plenty of time. So if you do have a question as we go through this, probably best to jot that question down and then ask that at the end, and we'll do our best to get to all of those questions that are there. I'm going to pass the mic here over to Carl to start with the Newspapers.com demo.
Okay, this is Carl. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so that we get a, let's go back to, okay. Now, there may be some of you today who've been on newspapers. You may be veteran users, but I know there's a lot of people who've never been to Newspapers.com. So I wanted to kind of just give you a brief overview of what the site looks like, how it works, kind of everything about it, really. All right. So when you come to our homepage here, just at Newspapers.com, there's you know, graphically a lot going on here, but really just a search bar that you can get into. There's a couple of getting started videos. If you're like me, you never watch the videos until you realize you've been doing it wrong for a while, and then you go back and watch them. But if you forget everything I said today, you can go back and watch these videos and get a pretty good overview of the site. We also like to keep our recently added newspapers and updated content on there as well, so people see what's going on. Mostly people, when they first come to the site, really want to just do a search. They want to kind of put something in there, a name or a keyword or an event or something, and see what kind of results they can get. We've placed that search bar on the home page for convenience. But up here, if you can see my pointer, are the main navigation for the site. And search will give you essentially that same experience. There are a few spots where you can add some additional details, but mostly it's just this bar. So if we do a simple search in there, I'm going to enter a name here, George T. Henry. This is actually a relative of my wife's that I've done a little research on recently, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. But you can do a quick search there. This is going to search all of the newspaper records that we have worldwide, really. And you're going to get a huge number, 63 million plus results for that, which is certainly a daunting idea. So with all databases, you have that ability to filter down, and this is no different. You're going to want to kind of pare that down to something that's reasonable to work with. We can do that by date or by area in a few different ways. Right here, this particular individual came over from England and moved to Utah, so I'm going to look in Utah for him. I can do that simply by clicking on the map. I could have typed the name in there, or you can choose it from a selection. If you're really good with your geography and the maps, I like that as a good way to go. You can continue to search or filter this rather by date. You can enter a range in there. Let's say he came here in 1870 and he died in 1824, so maybe I'll put 1825 in there. Oops. And you can update that, and that'll pare those numbers down considerably. There is more than one way to search on Newspapers.com. This is kind of a general search that you then filter down, but you can take the opposite approach, and I tend to do this more. If we leave there and go to the next section, which is Browse, this is really an intuitive way to view everything that's on the site, essentially funnel it down from the largest to the smallest. We start with, in this case, the United States of America, but you can see that there are a number of other countries, and this is expanding all the time. There's a great deal of content currently going in from Canada, and you'll see that list continue to expand. By filtering in advance, we can go down. I happen to know that he lived in a town called Marysvale. I'm going to go to there. You'll notice as I click on each of these buttons, in this area up above, you'll see this kind of breadcrumb of where we're going. And if I add more to that, it'll add things. Essentially, this is going to tell you exactly what the parameters are for the search that you can enter in this box. So I could go down, I could continue to get smaller. If I was looking for an event in 1903, I could just search there, or I could make it more broad. So if I go back to Marysvale there, where he lived, we can enter that same search in. And you'll see that you've got a much smaller number because we've already filtered this down to a smaller amount. You can continue to use some of the same filters, like date ranges here. We can use this slider to change the portion that we're searching and simply update that to get your new selection of results. There is also a way to search by the newspapers themselves. We go to papers here. This will show you all of the newspapers that are on newspapers.com, currently 15,674. And you can search for a particular newspaper just by going in and typing the name of that newspaper, or you can find them from different areas. If I were to go in here and find the Post-Dispatch, for instance, there are obviously different Post-Dispatches from around the country. Add St. Louis in there. I'm going to get just this paper. In this area here, you can see another search bar. If you want to kind of winnow down the newspapers and then do a search, you can approach it that way as well. And you still get the same filters that you would otherwise. Oops. At the same time, help me out here, Brent. How do I get away from that? There you go. At the same time, there is also a map that you can work with. The map is an area that a lot of people are not aware of, and it's really, really handy when you're doing research. If we kind of zoom in here, this is showing all of the newspapers that are available from around the country. And we go back to our same area here in Utah that we were looking at before. As I zoom in, you can see where all these newspapers are distributed throughout the state. And it breaks these maps down into counties. So if you're doing research by county, this is really beneficial. It's also great. We mentioned that he lived in Marysvale, individual. And if I go down here to Marysvale, this is Marysvale right here with the number 4 on it. From the map view, if you're not really familiar with the area and you're doing research, you can see that there are adjoining towns that could be beneficial to your research. So if I go to this town that's nearby called Junction, I can see the newspapers that are there. I can even go to that particular paper. And I can search from within that one. Or if I go back to Browse, that will now show me in the town of Junction instead of Marysvale. Because I may not have known that those two towns were nearby, I wouldn't know to do the research unless I could see that map view. So once people realize that's there, that's a really favorite place for people to go out and do research. If I staying here in Junction, we'll do that search one more time for him. And you can see there are a number of hits there. I didn't filter that by date, so I'm going to come down to somewhere close to when he died. Okay, so you've got a number of different hits there from a town that he didn't actually live in. So that you can see how that could benefit your research. We'll go ahead and click on one of those. Okay, you can see that this individual was a surveyor there in Paiute County. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how this search works in the back end. You'll notice that there is a result here highlighted for a George Morrill that's not the same person, and Henry Crowther over here that is not the same person. And then in fact, over here you can see that there are one of 9 matches on this page. Now it's possible that there are more than one George T. Henry matched on that page, but it's likely that it's not. This one is looking for an isolated T. The next one is also a T. So the search is looking for all of those terms that I've put in there. It's important to know that when we do our digitization, we key in a lot of the metadata, titles, dates, page numbers, city, county, state, things like that. But we do rely on OCR, optical character recognition, for the text of those pages. And where this is not segmented by articles, we're looking at the whole page when you do that. Now there's an algorithm that's looking at proximity and things like that to help identify things that actually are a true result. And that's how we've got this George T. Henry is from proximity there. But occasionally it will fool you, because the way newspapers are laid out, you could have something that begins the term at the bottom of a column, and then the second part of that term is at the top of the next column. So the proximity is not really close. It's a good idea when you're on a page to just scroll through those with the arrows and make sure that you don't have something there that's kind of avoided that algorithm. So, so now I have found something here. And the next question is obviously, what do I want to do with that? Well, if I was reading a newspaper at home, I would want to clip out whatever it was that was important for me to save. And here, it's not really any different. There is a clip feature right here, a little pair of scissors, and it's essentially a digital version of the same thing you would do at home. This box can move around and just kind of zero in to the article you want to save. You can add details about that. So I'll put in here George T. Henry, surveyor, and then I can clip that. If I wanted to add more information before I clip it, there is, I think this first box will allow you 100 characters. If you want to add a lot more detail, you can add 500 more here. Those things that you write in when you're clipping something become kind of important, because they become searchable text for this. We often see newspapers that get names wrong, or the spelling is wrong, or something like that. Anything that you add into this becomes part of those searchable fields. And so if you make a correction by putting it in right in here, then that will help the next researcher to find those materials. When you're done with that, you just click clip, and it's now made a clipping. This will be saved to my account. I can come back to this anytime. And I'll get to where that section is in just a moment. But the first thing that typically happens with people is they see this, they find something really great. Immediately they want to share it with a fellow researcher, or in a family history setting with the cousin that you have that's related to this same person, or something to that effect. There are many ways to share this, and there's a couple different buttons. First of all, there is a share to Ancestry right here, and this is a way to share to an actual tree on Ancestry. It will connect to your Ancestry account, you can select a person there and then attach this link to their tree. Through the regular share button, you still also have that share to Ancestry, and you have an option to save this clipping if you want to download that clipping to your hard drive. There is email, which a simple click there will give you a pre-populated box with an email area there that you can enter someone's email and send this off to them. The really important part about clippings and the exciting part about this is if you're working on newspapers.com, but you send this to people who have never heard of newspapers.com, are not a subscriber, or have access in any way, that link is a key that will allow them to get back to that source free of charge anytime. So when they get that email from you, it'll be one click and they'll be right back to where you were moments before. You can also share this on Facebook or on Twitter. If you're logged into those, which I'm not currently, it'll take you right to your page, and you can post that clipping immediately to your page. The last one over here, it says embed. This has a couple of different options in here that are important. If you're doing a blog or an online newsletter or something that you want to just include this in, you have HTML code in there that'll allow you to just embed that in your article. But this is the part I use all the time, and that is the link. This is essentially that same link that you would be sharing through those other methods, but you can copy that, send somebody a text or any other communications application, and you can share that same link, and it contains the same token that will allow them to see that for free. Go ahead and click out of here. Let's see. The other options here that work very similar to clippings are, move a box out of my way here on the screen, is the print and save section, and share would also work just like the clipping, but if you want to save this just to your hard drive, you can do the same flow with grabbing this box, put it around whatever you want to, and then save that. You're going to get an option here. One is a JPEG and one's a PDF, and the big difference is that the JPEG is just an image file. It doesn't contain any other information, and it's the full resolution image. But if you do a save as a PDF, and I'm going to go ahead and do this, it will download that section that you just highlighted. And if I open that, you'll see that it comes up with all of the information from where that image came from. It came from newspapers.com, a URL to get back there, and all of the pertinent information that you need to build a citation from. So those can be really handy, particularly if patrons are coming in and need something they want to take with them. These are great. This is the saved version of the PDF. If you were to print, you would get this exact same format for that. Let me go back here to where we were. Let's see. I wanted to talk the clippings that you make. This is the last thing on the main site here. The clippings that you make show up under this clippings tab, and everything for you. You can see this is me. These are all items that I have clipped. This is the one we did just a moment ago. You can come back to those at a later time and get back to where your research was. You can even search within these clippings for items that you've written in there. You can do it by the date that you clipped them, and there's additional filters here to help you find things that you previously have clipped. One thing that we do is we work with a lot of archives and libraries and of course publishers too. But when we do that, our program allows for us to build an additional site that they can access content. So if we work with an archive, we do digitization of their film, we return back to them all of the digital copies that we have. in an NDMP style format so that they can use those in the future to post themselves. After a 3-year embargo, they can post those on their own digital newspaper programs that they have on their site. But we also set up a portal for them so that they can access any of the digitized pages immediately. If I go over to here, okay, this is one of our partners is the California Digital Newspaper Collection, which is administered by University of California at Riverside. If you are at their location or one of their many locations, you can go to their on-site access, and it will give you a page that's very similar to our regular site. But it contains just, on this page, just the information that just the publications that we have digitized for them. If we go to browse, you'll see here that they are now their own little country, so that those who are in the libraries can access those records free of charge, and they don't even have to be signed into anything. If I were to sign out right now, I could still access all of those newspapers and images without running into a paywall or anything like that. We do have a lot of people that go into those research centers that have Newspapers.com subscriptions, and so we leave the rest of Newspapers.com in here so they can still access those. But for the patron that is not a subscriber, they can get to all of the information from that institution. Let's see. When they go to the papers page, they can see either all or just the papers that are in that institution. And let's see here. Search works the same way. If I were to put a name in here. Oops. Yeah, Brent just pointed out that we currently have a beta, a new search that's in beta right now, and it's put me into that beta search. But if we'll go ahead and do a search in there, and I'll show you a few of the features that are coming up in this. It works the same way, but when you get there, there is a little checkbox here to see only those free records that belong to this institution, or to see everything from Newspapers.com. You can click on that right there, and you know that all those results are going to be free to you. In this new search that we have this ability to toggle back and forth between all of the results or results that are actually obituaries that we've segmented out of the content. He obviously didn't live in Southern California, so it's not his obituary, but you can see some similar names that it's proposing could be matches. This is a great new feature, and I'm going to kind of turn this back to Brent to talk a little bit about this particular feature.
Thanks, Carl.
Stop sharing that.
So we thought it'd be good to show you these demo sites and get to know the tool set a little bit better, because we do offer those things to libraries and archives that are servicing their own portals to allow access to their digitized content. And the Newspaperscom platform can be a solution that archives and libraries use to offer that same kind of access with robust tool sets that we have to your patrons as they enter the library, and have the potential to save you on managing your own, or some of the costs that are associated with that, because we do all of that as free of charge. But as Carl mentioned, we had that new beta search that kind of highlighted the obits there. We wanted to talk a little bit about technology we were using to make that tool available and what we're doing there. And so we were going to talk a little bit about some AI technology and leveraging that in extracting facts from the newspaper pages. So here is a slide, and this is a newspaper page. And I'm going to walk through the different steps that we're taking to apply this artificial intelligence using machine learning to do some work on these newspapers. So the first thing that our data scientists did is segment a newspaper page into individual articles. So you can see this image on the left-hand side, these boxes that were drawn around all these different articles. And a computer has scanned this image and segmented this page to help identify each of these articles. So we have all these bounding boxes now. Then we extract the OCR, the optical character recognition text, from each of these bounding boxes. And then we look to see if the computer, this machine learning algorithm, thinks that that's an obit or not. And this is the first facts that we're actually using this machine learning process on, is to be able to identify and extract obituaries from the newspaper. As you can imagine, in the family history world, those are really valuable information in these newspapers that these genealogists are looking for. So that's kind of what we first targeted to apply this to. So we see if it's an obituary or not, and if it is an obituary, we actually comb through that text and work to extract those facts that are contained within there. So here is just an example of the text that was extracted from an obituary. And you can kind of get a feeling for the things that we are identifying and extracting in an obituary. So we're obviously interested in the person, the decedent of this obituary, their age. We're also grabbing a place of death here, as well as some dates. If you scroll down, if you look down at the bottom here, we're also looking at relationships. So based on what the computer was able to read on the syntax that's in this sentence and the deep learning models that are applied here, we understand that this is the parent of the decedent, as well as we have children that are the decedent. And so this is all new information that before, as Carl mentioned, it was really driven through a keyword search. And we just were trying to find keywords with algorithms on proximity and trying to get you to the right page. And all of these obituaries were in the newspapers and were very findable through the keyword search. But this allows us to make these connections between individuals, dates, and be a little smarter about how we can present those results. We actually present those results on Ancestry.com. So we took all these facts we were able to extract with fairly high accuracy rates through this deep learning model, and we put them on Ancestry.com as an index. And so now we can say, here's a person, here's their age, here's when they died, and it's very fielded, which if you've ever used Ancestry is a requirement to really find much on Ancestry.com, as well as generate hints. And so now users on Ancestry can have a hint given to them to say, we think we found an obituary for one of your relatives. And it'll bring it over to the index, show them the information. If they want to see the original image, they can come over to newspapers.com and find that original image. It's really made these obituaries much more findable. And it's become a very key collection on the Ancestry network. This slide just kind of shows you the volume of the number of obituaries we were able to extract from these. This is actually a count of names in the collection, not number of obituaries or records, but a count of names. And if you know family history, you know that census records are really the bread and butter of what people are finding on Ancestry to be able to link these generations over time. And these are all of the census records stacked up on the number of names that are contained within these. And we compare it to the number of obituary names we were able to extract out of this 550, 570 million images on newspapers.com. And it actually ends up being more names in these obituaries we extracted than were all of the census combined. I always like to show that slide because it's just mind-blowing to us that it really could be that much content and names on there. And it's interesting that this index has now become the #1 index on Ancestry for generating hints for our users. So we're very excited about that. And we think that this is just the start of how we can extract information from this OCR index of the newspapers and add more life and form around it to be able to tell better stories and to be able to deliver more to our customers. So we also wanted to talk to you a little bit about our manufacturing process. I'm just realizing now that I haven't been watching chat, and we've got some questions in here, but we'll come back to those and make sure we pick up all those answers as we finish up with this. So I want to talk to you about how we're able to digitize all of this content. So we use what's called lean manufacturing, and we went through a transformation in our workflow into lean. And I don't know, if you're not familiar with lean, it was kind of pioneered by the Toyota group in Japan and has the concept of kind of a real-time production process, or what they call continuous flow. So one of these favorite quotes of mine is this Tuichi Ono, one of the founders of this lean manufacturing, is having no problems is the biggest problem of all. And one of the things we've learned as we try to tackle some of our challenges of digitization is that we need to know where our challenges are. And when we hide the problems, we can't fix the problems. So we've been really working hard to smooth out and fix all of the problems that just arise in doing this kind of work. All right, so there's a lot in this slide, and I don't expect you to ingest every piece into our workflow here, but there's a lot of parts that go into creating these digital images that appear on newspapers.com and that turn into an NDMP deliverable. But the key pieces I wanted to show here is we're working really hard to create what's called a continuous flow. And to do that, we have a daily cadence or a daily kind of goal of how much we need to push through the pipe each day. And we manage that on a day-to-day basis, where in the past, we managed that on a month-to-month basis. And it's really made a big difference in how we've been able to digitize. And so the biggest point I wanted to point out here on the top here, we've went from what used to be about a 30 to 60-day velocity, meaning from the day we scanned an image to the day it hit the website was about 30 to 60 days. And we were actually pretty proud of that. But now in this workflow, we've now brought that velocity down to about 9 days from when it is scanned, from when it hits the site, or days after that can be starting to deliver to our customers, which is really exciting and helps us be more efficient in our digitization, as well as helps us improve the quality, as there is not these big buckets of rework. And if any of you had any experience with doing NDNP or other digitization process, you know that can be a real challenge as you get a month's work done and then you go to QA it and QC it and discover problems, you now have to rework potentially an entire month's worth of work on maybe fixing one small thing or maybe having several flaws. So in this case, we're looking at the work on it every day. So we QA yesterday's work and understand what that is, and handle rework that happens on a day-to-day basis. So these really fast feedback loops that we have built in here have really improved the quality. Again, there's a lot on this slide and won't go into all those details, but wanted to give you kind of a feel for what the things are that we're working on. And we actually have an initiative right now to bring our 9-day velocity down to as fast as 2-day velocity to be able to push to the site from scan to site, which we're pretty excited about. So just to give some context here and put it in perspective, if you think about our daily targets, we target to digitize 500,000 pages in a single day. That's from pushing images to the site, and everything has to move one step in the process every day, 500,000 pages. So that means 2.5 million pages every week has to be pushed to the site. And then going to the month, that's 10 million pages that we can accomplish on that month piece. So really, as we step back and think about, wow, 500,000 pages, in an NDNP process, we were working to do 100,000 pages over a period of 1 to 2 years. And so you can see the differences in scale that happen there. And it's sometimes surprising to myself that we're able to accomplish some of those targets. So that really kind of concludes the portions that we wanted to cover. And I know that we have some questions in here. And I think we can turn that over to Lisa to kind of moderate those questions. But I just wanted to say thank you for your time in going through this with us. And hopefully we can get to some of your questions now.
Brett and Carl, thank you so much. That was very interesting. It gives us a whole new look at how newspapers can continue to be a huge tool for people. And we did have a couple of questions in chat, so I'm going to start with those. Adam Bentz asked, he says, my institution has supplied microfilm for scanning several of our local newspapers. We have addresses to websites for each paper, but could really use a one-stop shop that contains all the papers we supply. How can we do that?
I believe he's probably referring to State Historical Society of Missouri, which currently has...
Actually,
go ahead.
Actually, I think he's from York County, Pennsylvania.
I might have to just get your name and email and get back to you. I'm not positive if there's a setup, but I can certainly look into that. We do have a couple of partners who have kind of have a listing of their newspapers that they've digitized, and they link over individually to different papers. Missouri currently is that way, but I know that they'll eventually have it into one spot. But I will check on York County, Pennsylvania, and see what I can find out there.
Okay. All right. And then Charles Rogers asked us, how accurate and reliable is the OCR?
That's a great question. OCR is really as good as the images you put into it. So currently using Abby's OCR engine, and we find the accuracy can range based on the image that we are adding into it. So our accuracy ranges anywhere from really close to 100% accurate, 99.8%, something like that, or modern content that is very clean, all the way down, to as low in the 70s or even lower, depending on how damaged the image was and the lighting settings for microfilm and things like that. So that's a challenge in answering a question on accuracy for OCRs. There's just such a range. If we were going to average what our content represents on the site, we would be in the 80% range.
Okay, great. All right, well, here's a couple more. Here's another one from Chris Garmier. What if the source microfilm isn't good? Do you digitize the original newsprint itself, or do you have options when you do this?
Yeah, so we typically work from microfilm, and that is our preferred media to work from, primarily because of the inexpensive nature to digitize that on these high-speed microfilm scanners. But we have run into that case where microfilm just either isn't available or is just a form of quality that it's not necessarily worth the digitization effort. And we have worked from paper before to digitize that, and we have the ability to capture that here in our headquarters in Utah if it can be shipped here. We also have worked with institutions to potentially provide camera setups to be able to capture digital images on their on-site to be able to add those to newspapers.com. But those certainly are the exception, and we work really hard to try to work from microfilm if we can. Many times we end up in a space where we can digitize a lot from microfilm and then fill in gaps with hard copy and paper to fill that in. But it's something we're always willing to open and talk about, especially if we can provide the on-site camera work, and then you can provide some operators to take those photos there.
Okay. Oh, here's a good question from Colin Dunn. Are you continuing to digitize, or are you slowing down a bit because of the pandemic?
Yeah, it is a great question. The pandemic has certainly thrown some challenges at us, as it has everyone. And we have slowed down our digitization. And the primary reason we have is because we have a hard time getting microfilm shipped to us. And so we can only hold so much microfilm in our inventory vault here until a continuous flow of microfilm shipped to us. And with many offices closed and many states having mandates that you cannot go into the office, people just cannot get us the microfilm we need to digitize. So we have slowed in the last, I would say, 15 days and are trying to hit different volumes right now.
Okay. Susan Lugo asks, is there any possibility of getting access through newspapers.com to those papers digitized some time ago and no longer supported online by Google?
So just to make sure I understand the question correctly, you're wondering if you can get access to newspapers that were digitized by another group, and one example could be Google, through the newspapers.com interface. And the answer is it's definitely possible. We've talked to Google about their program several times, and each individual that provided film to Google would be required to reach out to Google and ask that they provide digital images to us to host, and Google is willing to do that. And we've done that once or twice. And the interesting thing is we've actually many times had to re-digitize what Google had digitized before, just because it was of poor quality than what we'd like to put on newspapers.com to make it as searchable and functional as possible. And we're open and willing to do that as well, as we've looked at other groups and just ended up going back to microfilm and recreating those images and putting it online for those states and archives.
Okay. Okay, a couple more questions. I'll give people time to think of other things to type them in. What would you say are the benefits an archives or a library would see by working with you guys to digitize their newspaper holdings? Why should they work with you guys on this?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think I would just say that Ancestry right now is in an investment mode to create and help and work with libraries and archives to create these digital assets from microfilm and other sources that have been in preservation mode for so long. And it's a unique opportunity right now to be able to have a commercial statewide partnership with Ancestry to create these images at no cost. So, our basic kind of model is we digitize it for free, work together, give you access to it, and then after a 3-year embargo, you can make it available for free to your citizens of your state and worldwide. And so, as you can see on the scale, there's 3 years ends up being a very small time frame based on the amount of work we can get done together initially. So I think it's just a great time as Ancestry invests, and those benefits are really free digitization, free hosting, and then cut down on some of your overhead costs of your digital infrastructure.
Okay, great question. Another one. So what are you doing to preserve the content that you are digitizing?
Yeah, so really the answer is, we create these digital assets, but Ancestry and Newspapers.com mission is not preservation. And that really is where the value comes in with partnerships with archives and libraries. Our preference by far is to have a partnership with a library or archive and have them really lean in on the preservation side for this. And so when we digitize, let's say with a newspaper publisher directly, sometimes we lose out on that strong preservation influence that an archive and library partnership can provide. So we love the scenario where we have a partnership with an archive and library and a publisher, digitize everything public domain and not, and then work with the archive to then be able to preserve all these assets that are being created and have a more long-term solution, as you guys are really the experts on.
Okay. Another question is, does newspapers.com ingest content that is available through open APIs?
So typically, newspapers.com, well, right now we don't really have any open API access that we pull content in from. We do pull in content from the Library of Congress's Chronicling America, and that's the one open database that we pull the content into newspapers.com. We actually continue to make all that content that we pulled from Chronicling America available for free just on the newspapers.com platform. That way, if someone is trying to have this one-stop shop in a newspapers.com platform, they don't have to go to multiple places, but can have that content there available. We'd be interested in learning about other open APIs to see if it makes sense for Ancestry to do that. So we're always open to thinking about that.
Great. So if you guys know of an API and you are interested, that was from Errol Somé. So maybe Errol can reach out and let us know if he's aware of some that you guys might not be aware of. Do we have any more questions for Brent and Carl? I'd like to thank both Brent and Carl for sharing all of their expertise and their knowledge in this area. It's been interesting to see what services are available and how this all works. So I think that's it for questions today, guys. I thank you so much with that.
Lisa, let me just jump in and tell Adam Bent.
Sure.
I did get that information written down, so I will get back to you, Adam, as soon as possible.
There you go, Adam. We've got you connected, so we'll get the information that you need. So thank you all for joining us today for this webinar. And we'd just like to let you know that we've got another webinar next week coming up. It's our quarterly CoSA webinar, and it's on MPLP. So that should be an excellent, another opportunity for you to get some more professional development. Our SERI, our electronic records group initiative, has also got another webinar coming up too. So this is another great opportunity for you. Monthly, we have our CoSA member webinars, and they're normally the fourth Thursday of the month. Now, next month is going to be a fifth Thursday, but you can see what we've got scheduled here for the next couple of months. And again, to go to the CoSA website, you can register for all of these webinars. Just get them on your calendar, and then you'll be all set. Of course, we hope you'll stay informed and connected with us. And there's always lots of ways to do it, from our website to our Twitter and Facebook and YouTube channels. So, again, thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. We do have a short evaluation after when you log off, and please do take a minute and do that for us. It really helps us as we prepare additional webinars. We like knowing what worked for you, how did it help, what we would like to see more of. So, again, on behalf of CoSA, Carl and Brent, thank you so much for being our presenters today. Thank you all of our participants for being part of our webinar. We appreciate your time, and we hope to see you soon. Everyone, have a great day, stay well, and we'll talk to you soon.